Sometimes the scariest cases aren't planned by masterminds. They happen because a group of people suddenly stop seeing another human being as a person. And honestly, I think that's what makes this story so disturbing. Because this wasn't some serial killer stalking victims for years. This was 3 ordinary men standing inside a dormitory hallway late at night, slowly feeding off each other's cruelty until something absolutely horrific happened. And the worst part? One of them was still a middle school student. Tonight, we are going to talk about the tragic murder of ENNO Fariha. Welcome to the podcast you can't unhear. This case happened in May 2016 in Serang, Banten, Indonesia. And even years later, people still remember it because of how unbelievably brutal it was. Not just physically brutal, but psychologically disturbing too. Because when you really look at this case closely, it becomes less about evil monsters and more about how quickly violence can escalate when multiple people encourage each other. The victim was a young woman named ENNO Fariha. She was only 18 years old, still basically at the very beginning of adulthood. She had just graduated from vocational high school and immediately started working as an operator at a company. Reading about her made me sad before the crime even started, because she sounded hardworking, normal. Like someone just trying to start her life. Since her workplace was far from home, she stayed in a dormitory provided by the company. And this detail matters later because dormitories are supposed to feel safe, especially women's dormitories. There's this assumption that once you close your room door at night, you're protected from the outside world. But in this case, danger walked directly into that space. Now, the perpetrators weren't long-time criminal partners or gang members. That's another terrifying thing about this case. These 3 men weren't even originally together that night. The first was Rahmat Alim, still extremely young at the time, only an 8th grader. The second was Arif, 23 years old and a co-worker of ENNO's. And the third was Imam Harpiadi, who reportedly held resentment because ENNO had rejected him romantically. And this is where the story starts showing something really ugly about entitlement. Because none of these men were reacting to actual harm. They were reacting to rejection, bruised ego, humiliation. Which sounds small on paper, until you realize how dangerous certain people become when they feel rejected by women. And I think society still underestimates how much violence is rooted in wounded pride, especially male pride. The night everything happened started pretty casually. ENNO had met Alim through social media. They chatted online, got along well, and eventually planned to meet up. At first, they were supposed to go out somewhere, eat, hang out. Normal teenage stuff. But late that night, plans changed, and ENNO invited him to come to her dorm instead, just to talk. And this is the part that always hurts in cases like this, because people later analyze every tiny decision the victim made. She shouldn't have invited him. She shouldn't have trusted him. She shouldn't have opened the door. But hindsight always sounds smarter after tragedy happens. At the time, she probably thought she was just talking to someone she knew. Alim arrived around 1:30 in the morning. The dormitory itself was divided into separate male and female sections. When he finally found ENNO's room, they talked for a while. Then suddenly, Alim tried kissing her and pressured her to have sex. ENNO refused. She said she was afraid of getting pregnant. That should have been the end of the interaction. A normal person hears no and stops. But rejection changed the emotional atmosphere immediately. Aleem became upset and stepped outside to smoke. Then he encountered Arif. Now this next part feels almost surreal because of how random it was. Arif became suspicious, seeing someone unfamiliar wandering near the dorm late at night. When he asked who Aleem was visiting, Aleem answered, "Inda." The problem was, nobody there knew anyone named Inda, because online, ENNO had apparently used Inda as an alias. Then Imam joined the conversation, and suddenly all three men decided to go check together who Inda actually was. This is the moment the case changes psychologically. Because individually, maybe the situation ends differently. But groups can create a really dangerous dynamic. There's a psychological phenomenon where people become more extreme when surrounded by others encouraging the same emotion. Anger multiplies. Cruelty escalates. Responsibility gets psychologically diluted. Nobody feels fully accountable anymore because the violence becomes shared. ENNO had not locked her room door and was sleeping wearing only a tank top. And according to reports, seeing her vulnerable immediately shifted the situation into something predatory. What happened afterward became one of the most horrifying crimes Indonesia had seen in years. And honestly, I don't think graphic details are even necessary to understand how cruel this was. What matters is this. Three men collectively decided that ENNO's humanity no longer mattered. That's the real horror. Not just violence. Dehumanization. The attack escalated rapidly, becoming increasingly brutal, while the men encouraged each other instead of stopping. This case was known as ENNO CANGKUL in Indonesia. CANGKUL is an Indonesian word for hoe, as in the end of this brutal act. Arif ordered Aleem to insert the hoe handle into the victim's private area. The hoe handle penetrated through her body, reaching almost to her neck. However, there is this detail that disturbed people across Indonesia. At several points, one of them actually hesitated. Aleem reportedly became nauseous seeing the condition of the victim and briefly left the room. But then, he came back. That part really stayed with me, because it shows there was a moment where reality hit him. A moment where his body itself reacted in horror. But social pressure, fear, adrenaline, and group mentality pulled him back in. Sometimes evil isn't one giant decision. Sometimes it's repeatedly choosing not to stop. Afterward, the three men tried covering up the crime. They locked the room, closed the windows tightly, and left the dormitory. ENNO's body remained undiscovered for 2 days until residents noticed a foul smell. And honestly, imagining the people living nearby during those 2 days feels haunting. Everyone continuing normal routines, while something horrific sat hidden behind one locked door. After the murder was discovered, the case exploded across Indonesia almost immediately. Not just because of how brutal it was, but because people genuinely could not process how 3 young men could do something this horrific to an 18-year-old girl over something so small. On May 13th, 2016, ENNO's body was discovered inside her dormitory room. Her co-workers were the ones who found her, after noticing a terrible smell coming from the locked room. Opening a door expecting maybe someone fainted, or maybe there was a plumbing issue, only to walk into one of the most horrifying crime scenes Indonesia had seen in years. Just 2 days later, police had already tracked down the suspects as they left behind huge amounts of evidence. Police quickly connected the timeline, reconstructed the events, and arrested all 3 men. And then came the motives. This is where the case somehow becomes even more disturbing. because the reasons were so small. Arif claimed he was hurt because ENNO allegedly mocked his appearance. Imam was angry because she ignored his messages. And Alim was upset because he felt rejected and deceived about her name. That's it. No life-threatening conflict. No long history of violence between them. Just ego. Apparently, the atmosphere during reconstruction was extremely emotional. Residents gathered around the dormitory screaming insults at the suspects, while police forced them to reenact what happened that night. Because for the public, this case crossed into something beyond ordinary murder. People saw it as cruelty without humanity. And honestly, I think part of why Indonesia reacted so strongly was because ENNO represented a very ordinary young woman. A factory worker. A daughter. Someone trying to build a future independently. She could have been anyone's sibling, anyone's child. The court process stretched across months. The youngest perpetrator, Alim, was tried separately because he was still underage. In June 2016, he received the maximum sentence allowed for minors. 10 years in prison. Meanwhile, the two adult perpetrators faced much harsher charges. Prosecutors charged Rahmat Arifin and Imam Harpiadi with premeditated murder, sexual violence, and participation in the attack. Then, on January 25, 2017, prosecutors officially demanded the death penalty for both men. At that point, public anger was enormous. There were crowds saying, "If they don't get the death penalty, there is no justice." By February 8, 2017, the Tangerang District Court officially sentenced Rahmat Arifin and Imam Harpiadi to death. The judges stated that the brutality of the crime, combined with the suffering inflicted on the victim, made the defendants fully deserving of the maximum punishment. Even after the verdict, the emotional weight of the case never really disappeared, because no sentence could undo what happened inside that dorm room. No punishment could return ENNO to her family. Eventually, after trial, Alim received 10 years in prison due to being underage. Arif and Imam received death sentences. But even after sentencing, the case left lingering questions. People still debated strange details surrounding the crime scene, including where certain weapons came from and whether the attack had been partially planned beforehand. But I think this case still unsettles people because it destroys a comforting belief many of us have. The belief that extreme violence always comes from obvious monsters. Sometimes it comes from ordinary people making horrible choices together in a single night. It forces us to confront how quickly empathy can disappear when people stop seeing someone as human. ENNO Fariha should have been remembered as an 18-year-old girl beginning adulthood. Working hard. Living independently. Starting her future. Instead, her name became attached to one of the most brutal crimes in Indonesia's recent history. As always, stay safe out there, guys. See you on the next episode of the podcast You Can't Unhear.